Let's go. Brand nerds, back at you with a what's poppin' version of Brands, Beats, and Bytes. And we are going back into the crates to look at albums of the past, some wax. Today, brand nerds, we have with us someone who has been a brand nerd guest on our beloved podcast. He came to us on our first album, album one, track three, when we were recording these podcasts on the beautiful campus of Stanford University in Palo Alto. But that's not the reason why we brought him back. It was a lovely show. The reason why we brought him back is because of something new, but not really that new, that many of us marketers, LT, feel like we need to know about, but we don't. Which reminds me of a quote from an executive that I used to work with. He will remain unnamed because he may not want folks to know this, but he said this to me, LT. He said, by the way, if I say anything and you don't know what it means, I'd much rather you say, hey, I don't know what that means, than suffer silently in stupidity. Okay, that's what the dude said. And I'm like, okay, I get that. I get that. So LT, this is a subject where we kind of don't really know it, and we need an expert, and we don't want our brand nerds to suffer silently in stupidity. LT, who do we have in the building today?
D, that's a great setup. We have our great friend Seth Greenberg with us. Welcome, Seth.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks, DC.
So as DC alluded to, Seth was a previous guest, and it was album one, track three. And if you haven't listened, you ought to. It was really great.
Classic.
Yes, totally. And in that, Seth dropped some great knowledge on marketing, brands, and also, by the way, how to win radio contests. And you have to listen to that to get it. It was really fun and amusing to hear that. But anyway, won't go into Seth's full background again, but we'll tell you that for the past few years, Seth has been a very successful tech CMO, investor, and advisor, including his most recent stop as CMO of Veritone, which is a public company on NASDAQ. And in their first sentence of their about section, they say, quote, Veritone designs human-centered AI solutions. So truth be told, brand nerds, to many of you avid listeners, and we do appreciate you out there, AI has come up a lot on different episode tracks. And every time it has come up, and I have spoken with Seth afterward, he will say something like, hey, really enjoyed your conversation on AI. And I would really like to, offer a few words on this. To which I have said back to Seth, you have to come on, which is why he's here. And I also know in a nice way, you were saying there's a whole lot you two are missing here. So here we are, as DC alluded to. So Seth, we really wanted to start off with one question for you. And that is it's one question, and we'll go into, I'm sure, a lot of tangents. That won't be a problem with you. What should marketers and all of our brand nerds know when it comes to AI?
It ain't going away. So that's the one first thing. So deal with it. There's, so this conversation, we can zoom in, we can zoom out, we can talk at any type of level that you guys want, but this is the new normal.
Right. That's interesting. I'm glad you said that first. Do you want to add anything to that?
I do. Sometimes when a new normal happens, Seth and LT, it is difficult for us to let go of what was the old normal.
Right.
And so, given the new normal, and Seth, you rightly say it ain't going nowhere, what's some old stuff we might need to be letting go of that we think we shouldn't?
I guess 100% control. And, I'll try to give examples as I go, but, this is for the brand nerds, right? So for me, as we have this conversation, I'm going to keep myself honest by knowing my audience. I want to speak to brand nerds. Okay. So there's different types of audiences that need to be educated. This is for the brand nerds.
Love it.
Thank you
And
for
my
that.
background, and you can go back to, album one, track three, Dust Off the Cobwebs, and hear my background. So I'm not going to go back into that. But I've been a brand nerd, so I am one of us.
Mm,
I worked into it timely now with this being, Q1 at TurboTax. I worked
mhm,
at QuickBooks as a brand nerd. I got my first opportunity to be CMO after Intuit at LifeLock, and as a brand nerd, and then I flipped to the other side, and so I actually I went on to the vendor side, not the brand nerd side. Still, vendors have vendors have brands, but
Right.
it's different than your audience mostly, right? Because you talk a lot about, Coca-Cola and I listen to every episode of your show. So not a lot of
Right.
vendors, not a lot of vendor marketers on there. So for me to be a marketer at Alteryx, which is data science and analytics, and Veritone, which, as you said, Larry, we do these solutions for brands. I can see it on both sides. And
Mhm.
so it's really an interesting perspective to try to learn and educate. One of the reasons why I joined this company was because I wanted to learn myself. I knew that if I'm the filter and I don't know jack about AI, I I'm going to be an expert or a lot more knowledgeable by the end of the year, And so I've been there for a year, and so now I've done my job and I'm kind of phasing away and advising this company now. But to answer your question, DC, I think that one of the things that I experience as a marketer happens to be for a vendor this time is we want to do repositioning. Okay. So we want to reposition Veritone. So we're not everything to everybody. We want to be, everything to three different verticals. So
mhm,
it's not like Chat GPT that's just like a platform that everyone in the world can use. This
mhm,
is specifically for media and entertainment. It's for government, and it's for hiring solutions. Okay. So
mhm,
those are the three verticals.
mhm,
When I've worked with my traditional agencies that I've worked with for years and years and years, and we had a bake off and did all the normal stuff. How do we tell our story? And one of the things that I was hoping for is how are they using AI? If we're going to, try to communicate how great AI is and how it can solve a lot of problems and how different it is, how are the agencies, these traditional brand agencies, using AI to stand up our new positioning, to execute our new website and things like that. So I've had like a front row seat and had some expectations and hopes that we can all learn and accelerate together. But long-winded answer is it's slow. There's a lot of, the way that things have done, the legacy is kind of like a habit that I think you need to like pull a plug or force yourself to change the way that you're doing things.
mhm.
And I don't suffer for fools. I don't think that that's necessarily a great thing because I'm impatient. That's why I'm not a golfer. But I just want to see change happen faster than people are comfortable changing.
Mm,
Very interesting.
very.
Dave, did you catch that? And brand nerds, this is really for you. I know DC heard this, that the reason Seth took this job, and by the way, he told me this before he took it, was he wanted to really lean in and learn right in the belly of the beast. And I don't mean that in any pejorative way, right?
Mhm,
To really jump right into the fire of AI to really understand what this was all about. And there's no better way to do that than to go work for, a company that's obviously a leading company as it relates to AI based solutions. So that's what Seth has done, and I think it's super cool. D, anything to add on that?
nope.
So Seth, I have a follow-up question. You've set this up great. It's here to stay. That's wonderful. And you have spent this time, dedicated in the confluence of marketing and AI. So what should the brand nerds lean into? If they're saying you're saying it's here to stay, what should they really lean into and really understand about it as they lean into it?
So there's external facing AI, and I'll give you some examples, and there's internal facing AI. And inherently, when we talk about brand nerds with a capital B, you think about, the right side of the brain, the right brained, that type of, are you right brained? Are you left brained? Are you qualitative? Are you quantitative? So I think that that's too simplistic these days. And there are certain things that brand nerds, if I'm going to, answer the question, take it literally, can lean into on the production side of things, on the development side of things, on the creative side of things as well. But ultimately, if a CMO is listening to this, they're going to be more than just a brand nerd, right? They're going to make sure that their marketing ops person is keeping them on track, and that they can prove customer acquisition costs and lifetime value, and show their CEO or their CFO the budgets that they're getting are optimized and things like that. I'll give you a couple examples. There's one of the beautiful things of just diving into this world is that I get to help learn and then teach as well. And so one of the things that I've done along the way since we last talked is I've joined some companies, some startups, and it's funny because some of them didn't position themselves as AI. And then AI came along and they're like, you know what, that's more than a trend, that's here to stay. How do we incorporate what we do? And so if I'm a brand nerd, I would look at like one of my startups, and this is public facing. I said there's some public facing things and there's some internal facing things. The internal facing things is so much easier because that's about operational excellence and efficiencies. And you can, gain 15 to 25% or whatever, however you want to look at it in terms of being more efficient and doing a lot of things through AI quicker, faster, a lot more mundane things. And, again, I'll give you some examples, some real examples. The company that I want to reference right now is one of the companies that I advise called data.world. That's the URL, data.world. And the outward application that they have, if you go to data.world, they make it pretty prominent. So they started out as a modern catalog. They'll take all of your data and they will help you be more effective with it and utilize it and have anyone at your whole enterprise, no matter what department you're in, have the right access to it that you give the permissions to. But when it's infused now with AI, the outward looking module is called Archie. That's the name of their AI bot. You can go to data.world, and it's pretty prominent on their site. It's a prompt. It's like ChatGPT, and it's specific to data.world. It's almost like, and again, this is for the brand nerds, brands, as you're driving traffic, you need to convert that traffic. These are the SDRs, the sales development reps, right? So the prompt is like your first line of offense. You can ask it anything. And if you're trying to trick it and ask silly things, it will recognize that. But, I just encourage you guys to just go there and try yourself and ask it anything. It's basically like getting a knowledgeable support person on the phone. And it's evolved past like these like generic chat bots that we're all used to. That's an example of an outward thing. So I'll pause there and I'll give you some examples of inward things too. Any questions on that?
D, any question?
I don't have any questions, but I have a quick comment. When I first heard the word internet, I didn't know exactly what it meant, but it sounded like a category. Then after that, there were all these brands that popped up that were leveraging the internet. And I've never heard of Archie, but artificial intelligence to me is a category similar to internet.
Right.
I know GPT as a brand, and
Right.
now I'm hearing Archie. So that's just interesting to me.
Yeah. And that's their own they're leveraging some other technologies and creating their own, large language model that's specific to their, like, to their enterprise. So you can control what you want the responses to be based on the content that lives there. So internally, again, I'll stay with data.world as an example. And they haven't really published this, but I know, Brett is a serial entrepreneur. He's an amazing CEO. He wouldn't mind me sharing this to help make people smarter. So
What's Brett's last name, if you don't mind us asking?
Brett Hurt, Hurt.
Okay.
And he started Bizarre Voice, so the brand nerds, and he was the founder of that. That's the customer reviews platform that went public, so he took that public. Core Metrics was another one, and he and his team are so successful. I'm just happy to contribute how I can. So internally, what they do to make their teams more efficient is they have different tools for their sales reps. They have a prospect, they have this thing called prospect researcher. And that's where a business development rep and account executive, they basically look at the prompt will like if they're trying to go to LinkedIn and get some prospects, some leads. They're not just blindly sending out leads, calling them or emailing them stuff. This will help navigate their the type of content that they put out there. So if their prospect is looking for any of the brands that listen to the show, to your company, it's like advanced ABM, account-based marketing, and it will handhold you to fill out the prompts in a way. It'll say, okay, now copy and paste a paragraph from their LinkedIn into this prompt, and then it will say, how do you want to reach out to them? Is this a cold call? Is this an email? Are you going to see them at an event? We're going to help give you V1, that's key, the first version of we're your Cyrano. We're going to give you something as a thought starter, as an icebreaker. And it levels the playing field. The people that use these tools will be further along than these companies that don't use these tools.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Well said. Dee, I want to add something here. Another friend of ours who's been on the show, who's has a great ad background and is leaning in all the way, is Ed Collins. And Ed started a company called Firebase Studios, and they are using AI for help for the creative side, Seth, helping like audio production with voices. And it's incredible and how, both cost efficient as well as speed they can provide. And if you hear some of the voices, and they've replicated voices like Dee, they have Poetry's voice now. And if you hear Poetry's voice, it's incredible. It sounds just like poetry. That's Poetry Smith, who we've worked with, Seth. But anyways, I wanted to give a shout out to Ed, because that's, again, an AI-based thing that's really helping folks on the creative side. That's just another example, Seth.
Let me build on that, Larry, because like at Veritone as an example, we will get permission from a performer, and it's been public now that one of the key partnerships that Veritone has is with CAA, right? And so we'll get permission from a talent to replicate their voice, and can use that with their permission. They get paid and all this kind of stuff. It's all done legally and contractually, to do the voiceovers when they can't fly in for it. You look at like Ellen Kay, who's a radio personality, who's in hundreds of markets. Well, with her permission, we have taken her voice and then in each individual market been able to replicate the time of day and the weather, the temperature, all that kind of stuff, to personalize that. And then even like Vince Scully's, family has allowed Veritone to license Vince Scully's voice, right? And you know, it just goes on and on.
Wait, hold
And
on a second. That's
yeah,
trippy. And
yeah,
I mean trippy in actually a really cool way.
yeah,
Because again, as somebody like Vince Scully, who was, truly the best at his job for decades and decades, and lived a long, very wonderful life and passed away a few years ago.
yeah.
And with, again, this is key, brand nerds, with full agreement, copyrights, and everything with the family. Veritone's not just going off and throwing Vin's voice on something. It's done with permission, right, with the family. Seth, am I right about that?
100%. Same with
Right.
CBS News and you know, Walter Cronkite. But another practical use for the brand nerds is one of the things we do is translation with the voice, synthetic voice. So if you have a podcast, so let's take it this podcast. I don't know if DC speaks Mandarin. I'm
I
gonna
do
guess
not.
that you don't.
I do
Okay.
not.
There's no reason we can't clone your voice with your permission, translate this conversation into Mandarin, and then you can now distribute this and run your ads and all that kind of stuff worldwide. There's no reason why I can't do that, you know.
Wow.
And if you're listening to like a Audible book and it's read by the author,
Mhm.
well, you know, why not have the author's voice, similar voice, read it in French
Right.
and things like that, you know? So I think that there's really interesting practical uses of AI as well.
I love that you're bringing these, what simple, they're not simple, but really practical applications,
Yeah.
because that's where this is going, brand nerds, and that's why we're saying, we got to lean in as marketers. We got to lean in and really dive in and understand it. So with that sort of thought, Seth, where do you think people are missing or missing the mark, or maybe they're leaning in all the way, but sort of not doing things correctly?
You know, I'm not going to generalize and denigrate. So I think people are just so friggin' busy. They're busy, and
Right.
it takes a persona to have that curiosity. If you're someone, you know, I'll do like a Simon Sinek thing. If you're someone who has a propensity and a curiosity to learn and break through and you know, like roller coaster rides and like having your heart aflutter and getting like out of your comfort zone, boy, do I have something for you to learn. It's AI,
Mm.
you know, and it's a persona that's like an early adopter
Yep.
mentality type of thing.
Yep. 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 Very interesting.
Mm.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah. I'm thinking about a far less sophisticated thing. It's a software, and I started playing with it. You know, 20 years ago. It was Keynote, Seth and Larry.
Sure.
And I was a PC person, so I only knew PowerPoint and not that much. So I then go over to a Mac, and there's this thing called Keynote. And I will tell you, Seth and Larry, as I started it, I was, to use Charles Barkley's parlance, I was terrible. But then I kept playing with it. And now, while I'm not, graphic designer level, I'm pretty good.
Yep.
And so what I don't know about the brand nerds, because I certainly haven't done it yet, is how valuable is it to just play
Right.
in order to get better?
You know, and Barkley always does it in threes. He goes turbo, turbo, turbo. I
Yeah.
think that what you said is that there's a learning curve and there's a hurdle, you know, which is like, you know, when my younger son was younger, Larry knows Jonas, he said one day, I want to learn how to unicycle. You don't just pop on that thing and just zoom
Yeah.
away. You
Yeah.
fall on your ass, you get the bruises and the band-aids and all that kind of stuff, and then you've gone over that hurdle, you know. And so I just think that with this, it's oh, Chat GPT is free. Just get a friggin' account,
Right.
and just, you'll be amazed at this, like, this kind of like, this is a lame term. It's like an angel on your shoulder. I've never even said that. It's not even accurate, but it's just like a
Oh, it
partner.
is.
It's like,
I think that's a good parallel. It is.
yeah, yeah. And so you start putting things in there. I even, like, this morning, I'm like, how can I have an interesting conversation on a brand podcast about AI? I'm like, you know, I'm prompting the prompt to give me some
Yeah.
talking points for you guys.
What did it say?
You know what? Let's do it right now. So,
Ah,
how can I
well,
be
this is gonna be interesting.
interesting on an uh on a brand focused podcast about AI? Okay, so I typed that in, I hit the prompt, ChatGPT, to be interesting on a brand focused podcast about AI. You want to bring a unique perspective on or insight that aligns with the theme of the podcast while also showing your expertise and a passion for the subject matter.
Yeah.
Here's some tips: share success stories, offer practical tips and strategies, discuss ethical considerations, predict future trends, tell compelling stories, engage in thought-provoking discussions, and stay updated on industry news.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and there's a lot more density that I didn't read. I just read the
Right.
headlines, but this shit's pretty good, right? We wouldn't be talking about it if it
It
wasn't
is.
working.
It is.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
But we can veer off, but like my son has been like, he goes to San Diego State University, and he knows when to use it and when not to use it. And so,
Mhm.
I don't want to go off on the negative side, but I think that college students right now are on top of when not to use it, because
Right.
there's so many ways to get caught, and not just get caught up in it, but get caught using it as shortcuts. But it's like, please don't use a calculator as you're trying to figure out what
Yeah.
your new loan is going to be,
Yeah.
like that type of thing. So
No, you raise it. Tim Halloran, I don't know if you listened to that episode. Tim is an old friend and a marketing professor at Georgia Tech. And he's very aware of, as a professor, that, students have this ability. And, if you, again, as Tim talked about at Georgia Tech, right, lean in and really, that's the whole point of this, what we're trying to say, brand nerds, is lean into this, right? Lean into this. Of course, there's negative things, there's unintended consequences that are going to come up, but really lean into this and play and understand it. I think that that's the key part of this, that we're all sort of saying, right, Seth?
yeah, so let me give you the headlines, because I asked ChatGPT earlier today, what specifically can a brand marketer do to leverage AI? Okay, so now we're hitting the target here: audience insights and segmentation, predictive analytics and trend forecasting, customer experience enhancement, and there's all like the how-tos under that. These are the headlines: campaign optimization and ROI maximization, and competitive intelligence. One of the companies that I am an advisor in, and this was like really before the ChatGPT's trend, they implemented AI and machine learning early on. It's called TrackStreet. And so if you're a brand nerd and you have a brand that has MAP pricing, minimum advertised pricing, you can't scour the internet 24/7. You need help. You need machine learning.
Right.
TrackStreet is a vendor that has hundreds of amazing brands that you would recognize, that make sure that there's integrity in the pricing, that looks at all the different online channels. If you're like, a camera manufacturer or whomever, that you want uniformity in your pricing. So that's an example of AI out there to help.
Whew. This is great. Seth, anything to add before I think, or D, anything to add before we sign off here?
I got two things. Let's go back to Steve Jobs, rest in power. He had a quote about the computer and the way he described it in layperson's terms. He said the computer is like a bicycle for the mind. So if the computer is a bicycle of the mind, Seth, what is AI?
Ooh, that's
It's
a
the
great.
unicycle. That's the unicycle,
Ooh,
right?
Okay, got it. Got it. The
It's a little
unicycle, got it.
harder.
Okay, got it. All right. Thanks, Seth. That's good. I've got one more thing, but Larry, any
oh, keep going.
response to what you said? Okay, here's the second thing. I've been trying to figure out, why are we as brand nerds and beyond so fascinated with AI? And I was trying to find corollaries in other areas. And it made me think about superheroes. And so of the Marvel universe, by far the most popular of the superheroes is Iron Man, Tony Stark. And so I began to think, why is Tony Stark the most popular Marvel character? Because before the movies came out, Iron Man was lower down on the totem pole, if you will. But since the launch of the movies, and his was the first in the Marvel Universe, MCU, I mean, it's now Iron Man. And here's what I think it is. Tony Stark he's a dude. And he created these tools to make himself into a superhero. He's not strong like Thor.
Right.
Naturally strong. I know I'm going to a different area, but he can't fly like Superman. He's not the Man of Steel. He's fashioned himself into the superhero because of his selection of tools and how to use them. And when I think about the brand nerds out here, I look at AI as another tool to fashion yourself into a marketing superhero. If you don't figure out how to use this, brand nerds, you're going to get destroyed by the people who do.
Yes. Let me respond to that too before LT goes. I also think that when you talk about Tony Stark and movies, Iron Man, we're talking about storytelling. Us brand nerds are storytellers, right?
Yes.
And so what's fascinating about science fiction, and it's not one of my favorite genres, but it's a vision of the possibility, and there's nothing impossible about it. And if you look at science fiction, I call it science fact now. It's not even science fiction anymore.
Good.
So it's becoming real. It's becoming reality.
Yeah, I love where this is going, you guys. I love the fact that we're all really jumping into this, and building on what both of you were saying is that at the end of the day, this AI thing is so important, but it can't do your job for you. Right? Yeah. It can influence and help catapult you forward, but ultimately, almost like your Tony Stark example of Iron Man, D, it comes back to, it's still a tool, albeit a very important tool that will help you as you lean in, but it won't do your job for you. It will help, if you lean in, it will help you do your job much better, to be that marketing superhero that DC alluded to. Well said, LT. Anything else to say, Seth? Because you're the guru here before we sign off.
Well, so Google used to be called Bard. It's now called Gemini. It's going to make people's lives easier. Ultimately, you're the approver. You're responsible for it. Gemini is not going to get fired every 13 months like we are, like us CMOs. So it's our butts on the line, and leveraging AI to do the best job we can. And I don't be a writer that's not staring at a blank page. You get to take first draft and make it excellent.
Right. Ooh, that's well said. This has been great, Seth. We're just what we were looking for here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Always great to catch up.
Yes, always great. Thanks for listening to Brands, Beats, and Bytes. The executive producers are Jeff Shirley, Daryl D.C. Cobbin, Larry Taman, Haley Cobbin, Jay Tatum, Tom Dioro.
The Podfather.
That is he. And a friend of Seth's, by the way. And if you do like this podcast, please subscribe and share. And for those on Apple Podcasts, if you are so inclined, we love those excellent reviews. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we look forward to next time where we will have more enlightening and insightful talk about marketing.